Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today our guest is Joseph Bramante. Thanks for being on the show, Joseph.
Glad to be here.
As CEO of Tri-Arc Real Estate Partners, the metric by which he measures his success is the number of people he's helped achieve early retirement. He landed in multifamily real estate by accident in 2011 when he purchased his first multifamily property, sight unseen, while living and working abroad. Although there were numerous costly issues associated with the property, he was able to make a 200% return. In 2013, he partnered with two others, and they acquired three more multifamily properties, spent $5,000 to $30,000 per unit on renovations, and increased NOI across all by over 80%. Joseph, thank you again for your time. Give the listeners and myself a little more about your background in real estate, and let's jump into how you created that 200% return.
Sure. So, the first deal, it was kind of a baptism by fire for me. I got into the first one thinking it was a $3,000 per door renovation, and ended up being a $30,000 per door renovation. I've got a full podcast on it if you want to hear the whole story, but that's it. It wasn't intentional. It just happened that way, and I don't recommend anybody do a $30,000 per door renovation on their first go at it. It was more of a fight for survival for me on that first deal than a aspirations for high returns. By trade, I'm an engineer, so I'm very analytical, and that's kind of what I bring to the industry whenever I'm doing my deals. Have come from the oil and gas industry, was working for Exxon overseas, and got really honed my project management skills while there, and really learned how to do cost forecasting and budgeting and managing contracts. And these were much larger contracts. I was on a $22 billion project, so we were rounding things to the nearest million here, where they're not as big in the multifamily industry. So that's kind of my background. And I, as you mentioned, I did that first deal. It knocked it out of the park. Again, it was a fight for survival, and used the success of that one to raise capital for the next couple of deals. And other thing, that first one though, that was 50% my money. That was like half my money and half another Exxon employee's money. And so there was a lot at stake for us, and that's why I say fight for survival. It wasn't, I was going to lose a substantial amount of money on that deal, and I think that's kind of the generation that we came from, where you're putting up a lot of your own money doing deals. And I didn't learn about syndication until my second deal, and really it was still kind of a new thing for me. So, I really feel for your listeners, these guys who are in the industry now, and also just the passives. There's so much both equity and opportunity to invest compared to, I was 2011 is when I started, and it was kind of a new thing still. People were still very cautious because the crash was still very fresh in everybody's minds.
Right.
And to invest in a multifamily was, that was kind of unheard of, at least in the circles I was at.
What gave you the ability to go from, say $3,000 to $30,000 a unit in renovations and not, lose the property? Or, that would just kill most people, kill, most deals.
So that property was located in a very fluent area. It was located in a Class A market. It was a Class D property in a Class A location, and that was it. If I had made those same mistakes on a property in a Class D location, I wouldn't have survived. So the one thing I did, I think there was maybe 2 or 3 things I did right on that first deal, but one of those was the location. That whole thing you hear all the time, location. Well, I got that right. So thank God.
Well, and you said it was half your money, half your like a coworker's money, so you didn't have investors involved either. So that was beneficial on that first time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. We both did well, and we didn't. It was whatever money you put in, that's how much you own to the deal. There were no GP, LP splits or nothing. So it was, I mean, I wish I'd have had some sort of GP split in there, but it was the first one, and I made a lot of money on it. So I'm happy to have had that opportunity. And even to this day, I asked him, I was like, "What the hell were you thinking investing with me? I didn't know what the hell I was doing back then." He said, "Yeah, but you sounded like you did." So it's like,
there you go.
All right. So it was a unique situation in that we never planned on me kind of taking the lead and running with it. We were both supposed to just work on it 50-50, but as you know, in partnerships, there's always naturally going to be somebody who just kind of takes the reins. He was busy full time with Exxon, and I was as well for a while. And then 6 months into the ownership of that first property, ended up losing my job at Exxon, and that completely rocked my world, turned everything upside down. So I had no income, had a negative cash flowing property. It was a mess. So if your listeners want to hear the full details, there's a podcast on it on my LinkedIn page.
Wow. Okay. Well, maybe we can link that as well, in the show notes. It'd be great to hear more about it. But, I was thinking about, you in that first deal and the issues there. I mean, fortunately, it worked out in your favor. You did a few things right that really saved you. And now I know you have some advice for people that are picking a new syndicator. When you're, as a passive investor, potentially you're coming in and it's hard to know, right? I mean, it's hard to know because people put up a big story or whatever and say, I've invested in this many deals. It's hard to know who they should be investing with. So, I'd love to hear some tips that you have that can help them to know who they should or shouldn't invest with.
Yeah. So I kind of jotted down this list, and they're not really listed in any particular order. I mean, the first couple are going to be the most important, I think, but really they're all important. So I don't want you to don't want you to step over one in favor of the other. But experience for sure. I think it's pretty common. You see a lot of people talking about combined experience, or they start adding experience from like single family and like other little things they used to do. And they just say, oh, we've got this real estate experience. And then they try and transfer all those skills over to multifamily. And sure, while some of those skills will transfer, it's not a direct translation. And so I'd say investors really have to, question that and say, hey, what is this experience? And can you give me details or examples? And also you want to look for kind of years of experience. I mean, for me, ideally, you really want to have at least 5, preferably 10 years plus for the lead guy. Now, I realize that that's kind of hard to do these days. It really narrows things down for you. But I mean, as a passive, this is your investment. This is, those experiences, especially on the lead guy, really help safeguard that investment. And then just be cautious of the term combined experience. You see this pretty often. And I guess the best analogy I can think of is, do you have kids, Whitney?
I do.
Okay. How old are they?
I've got boys that are 5 and 6, and I've got a 7-month-old girl.
So you've hired babysitters then, right? I'm assuming you've had babysitters before?
We have.
Okay. And what's your process for interviewing that babysitter?
It's usually somebody that I know really well.
And they've been doing this.
It's like we know their parents. They're usually for somebody from church. We know their parents and we know them, and we've known this person for a long time, or they're a person that we really look up to in the church, somebody that's a grandmother.
Gotcha. So they got a lot of years experience individually, right?
That's right.
And you pay a premium for them, sure. So if you were to be offered, say, instead of one babysitter, you say, hey, look, I've got 3 babysitters. They're going to be a third the price. So together you're paying the same price, and they've all got 1 year experience babysitting. With that, so it's combined, you've got 3 years experience babysitting. Would those two translate? Would you favor maybe get a cheaper rate for the 3 babysitters who each have 1 year experience, or would you go with the one who's maybe a little bit more expensive but has 5 years experience individually?
Of course, you're going to go with one of the more experienced.
So it's a big difference. So you just got to be now. So that's kind of the issue I see with combined experience. I mean, we boast our combined experience, and I think it has, it certainly has its place in the industry. But you want to make sure that, kind of like the old saying, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So you really want to make sure that as a group, like the person with the least experience has at least 5 years. You don't want to have a bunch of first year or second year guys
I like how you said ask or provide details. Ask them to provide details.
Yeah. What else? I got another analogy. Instead of the babysitter, if you didn't have kids, there's a whiskey analogy where it's, if you like a good 15-year scotch, you can either pay for a 15-year or you can buy 3 5-year scotches and pour them into the same glass. You're not going to pay for the same price for those two options. So similar situation. Also, I'd say underwriting. I think underwriting these days is kind of a glossed over thing. I think syndicators now are kind of becoming more of marketers than actual investors. And, the industry is very tight now, as you know, and cap rate compression is not really working in the favor of all the investors, us included. It's extremely hard to find deals. And in the past, we could plan on buying a deal at a higher cap rate and exiting at a lower. And just that compression of the cap rate, if you don't do anything to the NOI, it gives you significant gains. Now that's not the case. Now your threat is cap rate expansion. So It's working against you. You're kind of going uphill there. So that's kind of what I would, that's one of the things you look for in strengths. On track record.
As important as underwriting is, what's maybe a question or two you could think of that we should ask around just underwriting?
So I actually did I've been doing this thing, it's called the breakdown, where I analyze the analysis. Investors, they'll send me deals. And I've been doing this for a while because I realize that, my investors are your investors and your investors are mine. They're all investing in everybody's deals. And you can't stop it and you don't want to, because you want to, these guys like to diversify and you don't want them just sitting around waiting on you, because then that puts a lot of pressure on you to buy a deal that maybe you shouldn't buy. So anyway, they've been coming with these deals, and I've been doing this on the side and just helping them out and giving them my thoughts, but then decided to start, doing these kind of webinars on them. So anyway, just a plug there. I've been doing this thing called the breakdown, where I kind of go through the deals. But the things I look for, a big one for me is loss to lease. I don't know why. It's a term that I've seen some of the top guys or the top kind of more mainstream syndicators that you see all over social media just completely ignore this term of loss to lease. And it's a big deal. Or they use what's called economic vacancy, where they smash the loss to lease, concessions, bad debt, and all that together into one line item. So you, the passive, they'll have no clue what their assumptions were. And those assumptions can make or break the deal. You're talking, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of the investment that are just completely gone by bad assumptions they made. So you really want them to show and break out what that economic vacancy is, and never accept a syndicator trying to kind of blend those together. The other thing I see is, and then this is a simple one that all passives can do. They'll give you some term. They'll say, you invest $100,000. Here's going to be your cash flow out. Here's going to be your cash outlays. Well, then you can kind of reverse into that number, and you can say, if you know the total equity they're raising, you can then calculate the total net cash flow they're predicting, and you can run IRRs on those total net cash flows. Or even, you don't have to do that part, but you can run an IRR just on what they give you for the 100K, and just double check that the IRR that they're telling you the project's going to make versus the IRR that they're telling you on that cash flow makes is the same, because it's not always the same. I just did a deal where it was almost a point different, which isn't a lot, but still, it's like, come on, man. Like, you couldn't get that basic metric correct. So it really questions, and the more errors you find in something, the more questions there are. I had an old manager at Exxon tell me once that you can't always be correct, but you can always be consistent. So when you start seeing a lot of inconsistencies across the package and investment package, you should be a little concerned.
Sure.
So that's what I would.
Got experience and underwriting, and what's next?
Track record. I would say you're looking for the direct contribution. I know it's real popular to do a lot of JVs, and JVs are great, but you just want to make sure that the person you're investing in actually had a kind of leadership role in a previous deal he was doing, and had some direct contribution to it, not somebody who's just been sitting on the sideline the whole time. And And then I realized I'm giving the syndicators out there a hard time, making it hard. You know, it's kind of the chicken and the egg thing, right? You're trying to get all this experience, but they won't give you a deal without experience. And so you can't get one without the other. I know it's hard. It was hard for me. You'll figure it out. And then round trip, round trip meaning you want somebody who's actually bought and sold a deal. That means that they bought a deal, they made a pro forma on it, then they sold it, and then now you can compare. Okay, you said it was going to perform this, and this is how it actually performed. Now, most likely you're not going to get the original pro forma, but you can at least see, okay, well, how did you perform on that deal, and what was the returns to the investors? A lot of times I'm seeing more of an emphasis placed on the total number of units somebody owns versus the actual performance on the units they have. And as a passive, you really want to focus on the performance on the units they have, because it's very easy these days to just put some investment packages together, get on social media, blast them out, raise some money, and just buy any deal that you see that comes across your desk. It's not so. I would encourage investors, really I don't care if somebody's got 10,000 units. You really want to focus on, okay, what's your track record and how did you perform on the units that you've had? And the best way is you want to see how they do on round trip selling.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think it's such a great point. Don't just listen about the one deal that they did 5 years ago.
Yeah, me too. Everybody wants to talk about that deal I did in 2011. I'm like, guys, it doesn't do me any good to talk about this deal because nothing that I did back then applies to right now. And so, but people love hearing about it. I don't know why. I think it's a cool story, and I don't mind telling it. But still, it's like, guys, it's like when you can buy Coke for a nickel. Like, cool. I bought my property for $25,000 a door. You can't do that anymore. But testimonials. I think testimonials and references are key. It's just like if you're hiring somebody, you're going to get references and testimonials, and they're going to give you their resume, and you got to look at this stuff. And I feel like a lot of times passives, somehow syndicators have tricked passives into thinking they have the power, but really it's the passives who have the power. And so they get pressured into doing deals without having all the data. But passives 100% hold all the power, so they should be commanding and demanding all this stuff from us. I would say management in-house. I know, again, a lot of people, when they're buying out of state, it's not really possible. But I'll tell you, here's the advantages you get when they have management in-house. And so you can take this for whatever it's worth. But when it's in-house, there is no finger pointing. There is no blame game of, okay, well, we use so-and-so manager company and they didn't do their job. It's all in-house, so it's all that syndicator's responsibility. And then there's just the speed of execution. My manager, our product manager is right behind me. So I can go next door and we can have a conversation about anything. And I don't need to wait for some report to come out to tell me what's going on. Plus you have the whole, the water cooler talk. You just hear about stuff that comes up. It wasn't planned. I go get some water. She's in the kitchen. She's doing whatever. And we just have conversations. And, a lot of value comes out of having that. And I understand it's not realistic for a lot of syndicators to have it in-house. They're not at that size, or they're buying everything out of state. There's lots of reasons. I'm just telling you, when it is in-house, these are the advantages that you do get. And then one of the last ones I would say, one of the last ones, but one of them is the GP-LP structure. This is one I would really pay a lot of attention to. So after the syndicator, if you're interviewing a syndicator and they've checked all these other boxes, now you're down to, okay, well, let's see how they're going to structure their deals. And this is basically, the marriage agreement, if you will, how the whole deal is going to go from here on out. And this is where I see a lot of passives kind of get really kind of bent over and screwed out of deals. So the structure 100% is based on how much experience they have. If they've got a couple years experience, you don't want them getting very high leverage on the carried interest on the hurdle. The reason being is that the less experienced you are, more likely you're going to make mistakes. So then less likely you are going to be to perform as pro forma. So you really need to pay attention to that part. So it's basically.
Could you give it just a basic example if somebody's not very familiar with how that structure, what that structure looks like?
There's typically two common structures I see on deals. There's the IRR hurdle structure where the project goes, it gets cash flows, and then At a certain point, typically at a sale or refinance, the return to the investor will hit, say, typically an 8% IRR. At that point, then the syndicator or the GP will receive, 25, 30% of the profits, and then the LP gets the rest. Now, that's for I would say typically 25 to 30% is what a very experienced GP would get on a deal. If you got a GP who's only been doing this for a couple years, less than 5 years, you would be wanting to have their GP LP split closer to probably 15 to 20%, not 25 to 30%. And then on the other end, I'm seeing even higher, these waterfalls, and waterfalls are fine, but typically we cap our waterfalls at 40%. And that is like with the 24% IRR. Like we have a very high standard for the IRR because that is a windfall event. But I've seen recently a hurdle go up as high as 50%. And as a passive, I don't care how great the syndicator is. There's nothing they could do. There's no amount of return they could give you that they would then earn 50% of the returns. That's just unheard of. So you really got to be kind of realistic with it. And then the other methodology is there's the carried interest model. So basically you're saying, okay, they're going to get probably 15 to 20% of the deal just for putting it together day one. And there's a preferred return, also typically 8%. So the passive will get 100% of all the money until they get an 8% pref. And then the GP will then get their portion. And then typically there's a catch up, meaning that 100% of the funds after you've gotten your pref go to the GP until he then gets his 8% for that. Now I've seen, those are going to be at a lower amount because I've seen them as high as 30%, which tells me obviously that syndicator never actually ran the numbers, because if you run the numbers at 30%, it's nearly impossible to get any deal to produce any kind of return at a 30% carried interest full catch up. It's really bad for the LP. But typically on the carried interest model, you're going to want to keep the splits at probably 80-20, 85-15. When we underwrite deals, it's even rare for us to have one that could even pencil out at a 25%. I mean, I've looked at heavy value add deals and a 75-25 split on carried interest with a full catch up to the GP just completely destroys the returns on the LP side. So you're really going to be looking for lower splits on that model versus the hurdle model. And I see too often people get them confused, or they get them mixed up. And so they don't know any better. They just put the same returns. They do 70-30 and it's a carried interest model thinking they're the same thing, and they're not. And again, both of them are, I come from an organization called Lifestyles Limited. They're based out of Houston. That was kind of how I got my start. I actually bought, and then after my first deal, I joined them and bought a couple more deals. And part of their guidelines was if you're a first-time syndicator, like the max they would let you go up to is like 10%. You're not going to make a lot of money. After that, you could actually think it was 5, and then 10 for your second, and 15 for your third, and they would cap you at 15, and that was it. No matter how much experience that you were capped at 15. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there are cases where if you've got a really good deal, I think sure it does warrant a 20%, but mathematically they're not going to pencil out on your average deal. It's not going to really pencil out very well above a 15. Other things I would look at.
Maybe one more thing, and then we got to go to a few final questions.
Sure. Is voting rights. You really want to check your voting rights as a passive, because you don't get no second pass at that. It's, sometimes you're going to have voting rights that are very skewed against you or in the GP's favor. And so you just want to make sure that there's nothing too crazy in there. And you want to check, okay, if the GP misperforms, what is your option to get them out? Because it's your deal. At the end of the day, it's 100% your deal. So don't let them think it's their deal. You vote them in. If you don't realize that, you are voting them in when you sign that LP agreement up front, and you can vote them out if they don't perform. So just keep that in mind, and make sure you're reviewing what those voting rights are, and consult an attorney if you need to on that. We're running out of time, so I won't go spend too much time onto that.
Yeah, I would even say hire your own securities attorney to review the documents outside of theirs.
Yeah, well, so you don't need a securities attorney for the LP agreement. Securities attorney will tell you about the PPM and stuff like that. Just
Right.
Any contract attorney can review the LP GP agreement and tell you, okay, this is in your favor or not. So yeah, but that means you spending some money, and if you're going to be a serious passive investor, unfortunately, you're going to have to spend some money, and you got to take some responsibility and to safeguard your own investment.
And that just bolsters the relationship too, and to move on, down the road and do numerous deals probably with that operator.
Yeah. A couple other, I won't go into details, but I'm just going to list off other things I'd mentioned. One is location. If you don't, if you're a first time, if you're buying a property in a far location that's far from the guy's base, make sure there's a really good, viable story of why that's going to make sense, and they've put good safeguards up against it, and why they're in that location. And then others, skin in the game. I mean, I probably should have said this earlier, but you want to make sure they're investing. I like 3 to 5%. I think that's still a lot. I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars typically on these larger deals. It really depends on the size of the deal. You got to be realistic, because if it's a massive deal, it's kind of hard to demand that the GP put 10% of a $50 million deal, and that's really hard to do. So, but for sure, some money in the game, and that money ideally should not be just their fee money, because then it's not really money. It's just free money that just transferred over. You want them to put actual money that they have in cash on hand into the deal.
Some great points, Joseph. I'm grateful for that.
We do work with some family offices, and they don't even give us credit for that. Like when we reinvest our fees into the deal, it doesn't count for them. They want to know our actual money.
Right.
So, yeah.
Joseph, what's been the hardest part of the syndication process for you? For me, it's been evolving, right? I've really kind of transitioned. I started off with the HNIs with the high net worth individuals, and now we're kind of transitioning to the equity groups. And so you learn a certain skill set dealing with the HNIs and managing all that. But then you go to, for me, it's transitioning to this the family office arena, where it's you got one guy in there who's got 90% of the deal, and if he doesn't like you, you're out of there. You make a mistake, he's your single vote. So for me, it's kind of just transitioning to that next level, going with those guys, and yeah, it's a different mindset when you go from your high net worth individuals, because you got to understand they're regular W-2 workers, and they're more cash flow focused, versus your family offices is more equity multiple focused, exiting a deal, long-term return. So it's two different mindsets. And for me, it's just been managing my, it's just acknowledging that and not getting the two mixed, because I've got deals with both. I got original deals with HNIs, and I got newer deals with family office groups. And so I got to get my messaging right for both and make sure that I'm executing according to both desires. Yeah, expectations are a little different.
Yeah.
So, how do you prepare for this potential downturn that everyone's talking about?
We're dropping our leverage. So we're being very careful on the leverage. We're being a little more conservative on our growth forecast, or less. Yeah. So we're not planning on growing as much, and we're hitting the vacancy a bit higher. So instead of operating at 94, 95% occupancy, we're saying we're probably going to be in the low 90s. So we're really just trying to stress test every deal we do, in the hopes that it can and that can sustain a 5% decrease in occupancy over a 1-year period. Because when you look at the Great Recession, that was what it had. It was like nationwide, it was about a 4% drop in occupancy. So we've been stress testing our models to sustain a 5% drop in occupancy over a 1-year period in order to get over that hump.
Nice. So
we're also looking at other properties and transitioning from older properties to slightly newer properties, stuff that we feel can weather the test of time a little bit longer, in case we've got to hold deals for longer. It's when you get these really old deals, which is how I got my start. My first deal was 1964 property. Still have it today. It's still great. I still love it. But it gets hard to lease those properties because they're older and there's so much more new product on the road compared to older products. So they're starting to age out faster than the newer stuff.
What's a way you've recently improved your business we could apply to ours?
Smart Sheets. It's Smart Sheets has been awesome. Well, we've completely from operations, we've completely redone our entire weekly report. The entire weekly report is in Smart Sheets. We've got an in-house version, an internal version, and an external version for our investors. It's the same, and it's the same single data entry, but it's just we filter out some things that we don't need to bother the investors with. One, because it's only really important for us, and two, it would just create confusion for them.
Sure.
And then we're able to then tie all those together. We have a dashboard for all the properties together. We've got leaderboards, so all of our property managers can see how their property stacks against the other properties. So we got.
What is Smart Sheets? So is that like by Google or Amazon?
No. It's its own smartsheets.com. It's its own thing.
Okay.
It's like Asana, but on crack. I mean, it's a fully customizable project management service. Okay. And it takes a little bit of work, but I mean, if you're good at Excel, you'll naturally gravitate towards it. A lot of the formulas are the same, but it's got it's got your standard kind of Excel sheet, but then it's got other types of sheets that are like a dashboard type that are more for like presenting, and it'll copy charts and stuff over, and it's live and does a lot of automation. And we've got we're doing a 40,000 per unit. It's actually 37,000 per unit renovation. It's on 220 units in Garden Oaks, $8.3 million rehab on and we've got the whole renovation in Smart Sheets. So we're tracking units, we're tracking invoices, we're tracking everything. Got a nice dashboard. The whole thing's got a schedule in it. And so anyway, Smart Sheets has been great to us, and
cool.
I recommend people look into it.
Appreciate that. And how do you give back?
How do I what?
How do you like to give back?
So for us, I'm a member of Rotary. So that's how I give back. And then also we support New Hope Housing here in Houston. And we're working on our own charity with them so that we can contribute back. And I'm not sure about other cities, but in Houston, the homeless situation is getting bad. It's not as bad as like California and stuff, but it's noticeable here as well. And so that's something that kind of near and dear to us is how we can help. And since we're in the housing industry, it's only natural that we help address a housing issue.
Yeah. Well, Joseph, you've been a great guest. I'm grateful for your time. You've laid out some great tips for passive investors. Anybody that's listening that's looking to vet an operator and figure out who they need to invest with, and some great questions. So tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
LinkedIn is probably the best spot for me. Just Joseph Bramante, I'll pop up. TriArc Real Estate Partners. You can shoot me an email. I'm at info@TriArcRep, TriArcRep.com. Or you can give me a call, 281-836-4181. I'm pretty good at returning my calls. I may not answer. I've been getting rather busy these days. So if I don't answer your call, don't worry, leave a voicemail. I promise I'll call you back. And then our website as well. We're actually getting a brand new website. It's going to be going live here in a couple weeks. So we're really excited about it. But yeah, please check it out at TriArcRep.com.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.